So we're in World Regions Geography Lecture 1, Part 2, finishing up climate and climate change. We're going to refer here, and as we go through the regions, you'll have to think about the climate classifications. That's the Köppen climate classification, named for Vladimir Köppen, a Russian who developed the system. And basically we have tropical, moist climates. We have dry climates, we have mid-latitude climates with cold winters, we have mid-latitude climates with moist cold winters and mild winters, and uh, polar climates and highland climates. And basically some regions are defined by their climate, such as North Africa and the Middle East, and other regions may have a more varied climate. Now, geomorphology is the physical processes that shape our Earth, shape the landforms. So things like, how do we make mountains? Orogenesis. Orogenesis is caused by convergent plates, can create mountains, such as the Himalayas. That's the Indian plate slamming into the Eurasian plate, creating the Himalayas. The Alps in Europe are caused by the African plate into the European plate, causing the Alps. Divergent plates are where plates are moving apart, and that is like the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. The newest land in the Atlantic is along this ridge. And as you move farther from it towards the continents, it is older. So the seafloor is older here than it is there. It's because of that divergent. Now, ecology, land, and environmental management, the biomes, large regions of similar climates and physical conditions. Again, I'm going to use the Middle East and North Africa as a very common similar climate and similar physical condition. That extends in. You can see this is a very dry, deserty area all through there. And if you look even across the globe and you look at other deserts, they're roughly at the same latitude. There's not a lot of places that there are deserts, but they are kind of connected and they are in similar. This is a big desert here. There's some desert here in North Africa, southwest area, of course, you know. Ecology, land, and environmental management, biodiversity. Species variation, very important. The more diverse an area is, the more vital the area is, and the more productive the area is going to be. Species variation, whether it's plants, animals, whatever. So anytime we lose a species, it hurts everything. And you can think of it, if you go and start taking out certain species, it changes all of the dynamics. An example of this has been when they killed off most of the wolves in Yellowstone. Okay, the wolves aren't there. That's all good for the cattlemen and the sheepmen, but it was really bad for certain types of species of plants, because with the wolves gone, the deer population exploded. And when the deer population exploded, they started eating more of the plants. And so that has impacts that drift all the way down through other species. And it allows invasive species, which is something we're going to talk about down here, invasive species to invade. Ecosystem services, rewilding, it's reintroduction of wild species. One of the things that you may or may not have been reading about is reintroduction of grizzly bears to California. There's a proposal. I actually did a research project on it once. to reintroduce grizzlies to California. Where would you put them? How many would you need? What would the population look like? Where would you get them from? That's real, all important things. Rewilding is something that you're starting to see a little bit more of. Um, I think in a lot of ways it's good, but it certainly changes everything when you reintroduce species that have died out in a region. Invasive species. Now, some things, invasive species mean a species that you brought from somewhere else. Um, some things are good, some things are bad, some things were brought in with a good purpose, but they have a bad effect. Carp introduced into California, striped bass introduced into California as sport fishing species have outperformed some native species and wreak havoc in some streams and rivers with native species. Other species that we may not think of is eucalyptus trees were brought here from Australia. Those have a big impact. They were brought here to control wetlands. Um, they work very well, but whether they're good or bad, it's kind of tough to say. Sustainability and the future. Sustainability is something we hear a lot about. Um, Sustainability is a triple bottom, serving profit, serving people, and serving the planet. A lot of times we think of sustainability, we think of simply a type of farming. Uh, People sometimes maybe think sustainability and organic are the same thing. That's not necessarily the case. But it's really balancing nature and man for the good of the planet and the long-term good. Growing local food. Um, the average food in this country travels about 1,000 miles to market. Think about that. Now we're in a unique position because being in California, so much of what we eat in this country is grown right here. If it's fruits and vegetables and nuts, a lot of it is grown right here in California. I mean, we ship globally. The most productive agricultural region in the world is the San Joaquin Valley. So, we ship our products all over, which is great for the farmers. They make money. They support the local economy. But is it the most sustainable way to do it? Probably not. Water conservation, big issue in California. We've been in a drought for a number of years. We've had a little bit of a respite this year, but the likelihood that we'll go back into a drought for a longer period of time is probably pretty good. Recycled compost, reusing the plants that you've already grown and consumed. Now, a little history and economy and territory. Another part, big important part of figuring out regions and geographies by common history, common economy, and territories. Colonialism. Some of you may have heard of that. Regions and societies dominated by an external society. Colonialism has a lot of aspects. It's about domination. It's about cultural subversion. It's about extraction of wealth, extraction of resources. It is about enforcing culture, government, language, religion on peoples who didn't have that religion, that language, that custom. The first wave when we think of colonialism is European investment in port cities. So, in other words, Europeans traveled around the globe, first the Portuguese here, forming port cities in order to open up trade with this region right here. Then along came the Spanish. Columbus had a better idea, going to sail here, to end up over here. That was his idea. Didn't know about this big old pieces of rock strung in the way. Kind of ran into them. Changed everything. Europeans invested in port cities. They began plantation economies. Now, a plantation economy is where there's one primary crop that's grown for export to the home country. Second wave of colonialism was after North and South America were colonized. Then the Europeans spread into Africa, Asia, and Australia. Imperialism, Industrial Revolution, capitalism all came out of this second wave. Imperialism is that spread of the empire by conquest of cultures that were there previously. Industrial Revolution, you extracted raw materials from this region, sent it back to the countries here where goods were manufactured, and then the finished goods were shipped back out. And that capitalism is that concentration of wealth. Decolonization. So what happened? How did colonies end? Why did they end? Well, decolonization really kind of started with the American Revolution, and then you had the Spanish colonies break away from Spain, and the big kicker was World War I. World War I kind of sapped the power from the European countries, and you began this process of decolonization, and World War II put the nail in the coffin. Now, decolonization also gave rise to communism and the Cold War in post-World War II. The economy, accumulation, and production of inequality. So there's four things we look at in the economy. The primary, extractive, that's your mining, that sort of thing. Secondary, manufacturing, processing, that's your secondary. Tertiary are your service industries, whether this guy's working in a Starbucks or at Sears, that's a tertiary position. Quaternary is this activity here, higher level activity, the design, the function, the control. And MNCs are multinational corporations.